There is a systematic plan for breaking northern Syria away from the rest of the country and creating this independent Kurdish state. This is actually part of an old Israeli government project, and I'm going to tell you about this. It was originally designed to break off that northern part of the country so that Israel could kind of control things from behind the curtain. And this state would be used by Israel to manipulate the things going on down in greater Syria. This is essentially the same thing that Israel did in Sudan to try to exert control over Egypt. And I've reported on this before in my Ginny Oil series, so I won't go into detail. But the Israeli Mossad instigated a civil war in Sudan that resulted in that oil-rich region in the south breaking away from the north. And they formed their own nation. And that's what brought about the creation of South Sudan in 2011. Ben-Gurion, who was a renowned Israeli terrorist, what was it that he implemented back in the 1950s? Well, let's take a look at what the Times of Israel says in an article that was written on the 20th of August of 2014. It was entitled Israel's Periphery Strategy. Here's what it says. Quote, after its inception, Israel soon realized that reliance on traditional firepower cannot and will not always prove to be a feasible and wise option in the longer run against surrounding belligerent Arab states. With this realization came the infamous yet subtle Ben-Gurion's periphery strategy. And this article goes on to describe how Iran stood up to Israel in the region. And by doing so, this screwed up Israel's plans, which, as the article clearly says, the plans were to chop up the entire Middle East, to take all of these countries, sow discord, divide them up, create civil war, split them up, not just in the Middle East, but also North Africa, to suit the needs of Israel. But as the article points out, despite the setback from Iran, Israel never turned away from the periphery strategy. So let's skip forward to the 2000s, and we've got Israel back at it. But this time, Israel had managed not just to be this lone little country in the Middle East. Now, by the 2000s, Israel had managed to get its Zionist assets in positions of power all over in the U.S. government, all over in the U.S. State Department. And we call these assets neocons. A neocon is basically just an American traitor. It's an American who sells out his own people to serve the interests of Israel in exchange for Israel helping them to acquire things like political power through AIPAC and other organizations, and also to help these neocons to accumulate great wealth that comes as a result of their connections to the military-industrial complex and all of the warmongering that it does. So you've got George H.W. Bush, who leaves and goes on to make even more money than he already had by doing this on behalf of Israel and the Saudis. So they make a lot of money. But let's go back to Sudan. There are tons of articles out there that confirm all of this stuff that I'm telling you. So feel free to always check behind me. Do your own research. Take something I say, do some research if you ever are in doubt. But here's what we've got. What happened was that after Israel broke the South away from Sudan to create South Sudan, Israel continued selling tons of weapons to the South, to their South Sudanese militias and to their police forces, so that they can retain control over the other factions down there. But the truth is, Israel's no friend to the Sudanese, to the South Sudanese. Israel is no friend to anyone. It's a parasite state. It's a parasite state that latches onto hosts and sucks the blood out of them until they're dead, like vampires or leeches. The main thing that Israel wanted out of Sudan, at least initially, was to have an Israeli outpost in North Africa to help check the power of Israel's archenemy, which at that time was Sudan's neighbor of Egypt. Big enemies of Israel at the time. But so what they did was they did the same thing that the Zionists do everywhere they go. They created instability. They created warfare. They fomented civil war. And since the beginning of this Sudanese civil war in December of 2013, chaos is what the people have gotten. We have seen millions of civilians that have been displaced from their homes. They're homeless, mobilizing, having to move because of all the warfare. There have been tens of thousands of these civilians, non-combatants, that have been killed because of this Zionist-instigated war. Their economy has experienced hyperinflation. The oil industry, they export oil, that's really what their economy relies on. That has collapsed. So Israel created a humanitarian catastrophe in this region. In fact, according to official statistics, just between the months of October to December of 2017, nearly, I think it's 4.8 million, nearly 5 million Sudanese civilians were in need of emergency food assistance to stave off starvation. But is the South Sudanese government spending money to buy food for the people? No, of course not. They're spending millions of dollars, that's to be sure. They're spending money. But what they're doing is they're spending millions of dollars to buy Israeli weapons, some of which are being produced, being manufactured by the U.S.-British military-industrial complex that also provides Israel with its weapons. According to the Times of Israel, the virtual collapse of the South Sudanese society has necessitated that the South Sudanese government, the militias, the police, they have to use drones and security cameras all around the country's capital because there is this unprecedented crime wave. It's out of control. So my point here is to show you that what is happening in Syria right now with the arming and support being given to the Kurds so that they can try and split the country apart, that's straight out of the Israeli Zionist playbook. It's a historical and verifiable fact that David Ben-Gurion's periphery strategy has been used to divide nations, and it continues to be used by these Israeli Zionists and their puppets in the United States to accomplish the geopolitical ambitions of the Zionist state throughout the Middle East. But long story short, getting back to Syria, this old Israeli plan for splitting up the country, this was picked up by France, who worked out a deal with Turkey. The Israeli Zionists control the U.S. government's foreign policy, so it has been the Zionists all along that have been pulling the strings, flipping the levers behind the curtain, getting all these parties to do the dirty work for Israel while they can sit there and pretend like their hands are clean. But folks, isn't it curious that ISIS never once tried to attack Israel? Isn't it curious that these fanatics, these Salafist mercenaries, they never went after the Israelis. They never went after the Jews, who are like their mortal enemies. That's because they were puppets of the Israelis. So things were going pretty smoothly for Israel and its conspirators, co-conspirators, up until Russia was on the cusp of thwarting the whole thing, screwing up the scheme. So when Russia stopped the CIA Mossad operation from outright overthrowing the entire Syrian government, the Zionist coalition just fell back on that Ben-Gurion plan to just break off the north into its own territory. Because northeastern Syria is where A whole lot of the oil fields are anyway. That's where the money is. That down in the Golan Heights, and there's a couple other places. Well, folks, I hope that this video has been informative. I know that the topic of the Middle East and history and everything, to most people out there, this is very boring stuff. Not very interesting. But for the majority, I think, of my viewers, I think most of you do have a taste for this kind of stuff. This is real life drama. This is real history happening before our eyes. And we get to see it and to some degree be a part of it. So I hope that you guys could see from this video that the evidence clearly demonstrates that the dividing of Syria, this is not the result of some organic grassroots dispute by Syrian citizens who just thought one day, you know what, let's go to war with each other. Let's have a civil war. That's not what happened. What is happening in Syria today is part of an actual Zionist plot and agenda to, just as the Times of Israel said, to forge close ties with ethnic minorities such as the Kurds in order to, quote, yield immediate dividends for Israel. If Israel itself takes credit for this plan, why should we deny it? Guys, because I speak out against the Zionists, my channel is heavily targeted. And at any point, YouTube, which maintains, as you know, a Zionist censor brigade, they could completely delete my channel. If you do appreciate this work that I do, I want to ask you for a small donation to support my work. This is my full-time job. I do a ton of research and studying and maintaining relationships with my contacts in various parts of the Middle East and elsewhere so that I can get accurate, up-to-date information. If you can donate, I would invite you to go to patreon.com/endtimesnewsreport. You can also make a donation through paypal.me/endtimesnewsreport. And if you want to send me a donation directly by mail, mail it to Jake Morphonios, P.O. Box 1333, Kernersville, North Carolina 27285. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a great night. United we stand, divided we fall. For Blackstone Intelligence, I'm Jake Morphonios.